Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this year's virtual Bermuda Tech Summit. My name is Susan Pateras, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Liberty Specialty Markets. And I also sit as a Board of Director of the BDA, Bermuda Business Development Agency. So thank you for joining us today for what I hope to be a really interactive discussion on innovation essentials in insurance. I've had the privilege to work in this business for over 25 years. I've worn multiple hats as a broker, as an underwriter, as well as in the operations space. Anyone who knows me knows I'm quite bullish about the future, not only of our domicile here in Bermuda, but also about our industry as a whole. However, it's not lost on me that the rate of change is something we haven't seen in this lifetime. It's higher than ever before, and it's also shifting customer demands, and it's presenting real challenges to our business. But as the eternal optimist, I also believe that these challenges also force us to reinvent ourselves, our business, and create new opportunities. And we've seen these new challenges and opportunities that have brought many insurers to adopt a strategic approach to innovation. So whether they were driven forward based on leveraging internal best practices, or whether they were responding to the increased customer demands that I spoke about, or maybe it was external forces that are becoming more and more prevalent, such as rating agencies who are now specifically incorporating innovation criteria into the rating process. I also think we can all agree that the ongoing pandemic and shifts to ways in which we're working now and virtually how we're coming together like today have been a further call to action on the journey to real innovation. So today with this amazing panel and thought leaders, we plan to explore three key concepts. Why innovation is essential, especially in a post-COVID climate, where organizations should start, and how to drive innovation and digital transformation. And so if I could make some introductions, joining me for this critical conversation, I'm extremely excited. This diverse team of experts to have with us. I'll start with Charlie Sidoti, who's the Executive Director of Innovation Underwriters. He's also spent 25 years in the P&C marketplace. He's run multiple technology startups, and now he finds himself running the insurance-focused innovation hub at Cambridge Innovation Center. So thank you. And then we have Dr. Phil Budden, Senior Lecturer at MIT Sloan School of Management for Technology, Innovation, Entrepreneurship, and Strategy, and is also a board member of Innovation Underwriters. As a Senior Lecturer at MIT, Phil focuses on innovation-driven entrepreneurship and innovation ecosystems, and co-creates or co-teaches the successful Regional Entrepreneurship Acceleration Program, an exec ed program for regional teams from around the globe interested in accelerating innovation-driven entrepreneurship. Next, we have Cynthia Hardy-Young, founder of Pivot Global Partners. Cynthia has 30 years of experience in the industry and is CEO and founder of Pivot Global Partners. Really happy to have you here today. Pivot is a global professional service firm that guides organizations, including insurance companies and insurtechs, through their journeys and their pivots, similar to what we'll be discussing today, with the focus on leadership and culture, organizational design, process improvement, and change management. And last but not least, we have Stefan Antonis, Design Director at Carter Edwards. Stefan is a multidisciplinary designer with over 15 years of experience and currently leads product and service design projects at Carter Edwards, a digital experience and service innovation firm that uses a combination of human-created design and lean practices to help its clients reach digital products, experiences, and organizational change. So those intros did not do anyone justice. I shortened them because you guys have amazing background experience that I hope we're really going to talk about today as we walk through this journey together. And so given the time, I wanted to just really jump right in, if that's okay with everyone, and start to talk about maybe the importance of innovation. And to me, the why around sustained innovation and digital transformation, it seems somewhat obvious, right? Living in this world, having talked about the acceleration of change. But for many companies, if we look under the hood, I don't think we're seeing that, right? And we talked about this industry, the P&C industry, many of us who've operated in it for many decades. Historically, we've been quite slow to change. So if I can start with you, Phil, why in your mind is a transformative approach to innovation essential in a post-COVID climate?
Well, Susan, a great question. And as the first speaker, let me say thank you for having us here, and especially for the BDA for holding this event. Um, Innovation really matters. It has been a fundamental part of industrial revolution for several centuries. In fact, back at the very start, insurance was a fancy new innovation back in around 1700. And it's really interesting looking at the waves of innovation, which we study at MIT. This current wave, some call it Industry 4.0, is really being driven by the digital transformation and is a greater shift than we've seen in any other of the waves. And it's a real challenge. But as with all waves, it doesn't hit the shore evenly. And so it hit music 20 years ago. It hit financial services about 5 years ago, but it's definitely hitting insurance. So while my background is in innovation, it's really important to see how it's now hitting the insurance sector and how this tech of the digital transformation is really driving things forwards. We at MIT have a particular approach to innovation with our definition and our sense of process and ecosystem. But I think it's really important for sectors and parts of the world that are concerned about those sectors to be taking innovation seriously right now.
It's a great, I think of innovation as a disruptor, but sometimes you're disrupted from the outside and sometimes you're disrupted from the inside. Yes. So what would your thoughts be on how, and innovation is a very broad concept. And so what are your thoughts, or maybe how MIT defines innovation?
Well, MIT has had to come up with a definition because it has an innovation initiative. And people will be surprised that our short definition doesn't actually mention the word technology, even though we love it and it's in the name of our institute. So MIT's definition is a process of taking ideas from inception to impact. And so it can be major transformational innovations, applying AI and the latest machine learning, all the way through to more humdrum innovations back closer to the back office, for example. The key thing with this definition is, unless you're on the right side of it, you run the risk of being disrupted. So we talk about transformational innovation. It's what those with an innovation strategy should be aiming for. But those who don't get on the right side of it, like the music industry, like Kodak and Polaroid, will get disrupted. And insurance is now facing its wave of transformation. And those who don't get it right will be disrupted. A lot of the young startups in this space, insurtechs as they're known, are setting out from places like MIT to disrupt the big incumbents. And so it's really important for the large players, the governments, the large corporations, the reinsurers, to think about how do they manage the transformation so they don't themselves get accidentally disrupted in the process.
I love that concept, and being succinct and short and not referencing technology is interesting way in which you approach it, because it could mean very different things. We talked about external factors, I mentioned in my opening. What are your thoughts about innovation being weaved into the credit rating requirements that we've seen, such as AM Best?
That's a great question, Susan. I think the fact that the key rating agency for the insurance sector, AM Best, has decided to factor in an assessment of companies' efforts at innovation is really important. Their final report came out in March and has been pretty overshadowed by the COVID crisis. But I know a lot of the C-suite insurance executives that I've been working and consulting with are aware that this is coming. The ratings will hit home in 2021. But it's interesting, AM Best has published the fact that they did a little internal assessment, and they only think 1% of insurers are really leaders in innovation. 50% are behind the game in terms of the large insurance companies they are looking at. And the concern, as I sit here at MIT and the Cambridge area with my other colleagues on this panel looking out, is we see new startup companies coming in, insurtechs, who are going to come after the incumbents. But we also sense that a lot of big tech companies might just do a little insurance on the side of their Amazon or Microsoft portfolio. And so this is a really important moment. And I think it's good that AM Best is going to rate the companies, because it set out a very clear framework as to what companies need to do. But it's certainly got people's attention that the rating agency is going to downgrade or upgrade your company, depending on how well it's doing at this innovation thing.
Yeah, great points, and very sobering stats, which I guess we'll see more of in 2021 and moving forward. I personally have seen the importance firsthand of linking the operational side of our operating models and processes. But I've also learned just how important and critical it is to understand the impact of change, the potential mindset shift that needs to take place, and employee engagement that also needs to take place alongside strategic innovation. And so I was going to maybe pivot to you, Cynthia, and ask your thoughts around aligning people, talent, and culture, and the role you feel corporate culture plays in an organization's ability to respond to change and foster really true innovation.
Well, thank you, Susan and BDA, for the invitation. And like my colleagues, we're delighted to talk about this topic, and we sense the urgency. We're all right in the hub of it. And this question, I think, is so appropriate, and I could talk about it all day, but I will stay within our time limits. But I think I should step back first and talk about what culture is, because it's a critical enabler. But in the first instance, I would say that culture is quite simply values and behaviors. It's what leaders do, what the employees in an organization do, what the providers and vendors do. It's what they do and what they don't do. It's what they say and how they say it. It's how they act and why they do it. It's all of that combined, and it's what you consistently do. You're demonstrating what matters to you and your values. And it's what you allow, it's what you don't allow. And so when you have a corporate culture through action and thought that embraces change, you've got one type of organization. But you can have the exact opposite, and it has huge implications for an organization. Quite simply, if you have a corporate culture that is receptive to change, that is on the lookout for it, that wants to engineer change and stay ahead of it and not just react to it, you've got an entity then that is understanding that it needs to identify change, figure out what matters to them, align people to be able to make it happen, and also to make it stick. So let me give you examples of what I mean, because I think this is what happens every day in organizations. You could have at the top leaders of an organization who don't think about change. They're every day just doing the perfunctory and getting it done. And that could be basically the direction they're giving to their people. Now, that's pretty much status quo, and they're going to be in trouble. You could have the organization where leaders in the organization recognize that change is important, figure out where they are strategically and what they need to do differently. But you can have employees who are not on board. They will say, sometimes I've seen it, I'll wait it out, right? And you can have the next new idea. You can have leaders who want to make change, and you don't have the capabilities in-house to make it happen. You can have leaders and employees that are all on board and recognizing you've got to fill some gaps, both with internal and external knowledge. And then I've seen where leaders are not on board, but you've got aggressive, creative employees who are coming forward with innovative ideas. You've got a flavor for the day. In all of that, the organization that says, I live in an environment that's constantly changing, and I need to get ahead of it and figure out what's important to me. I need to equip and enable my people to be able to do their best when it comes to coming up with solutions that meet the needs of our customers. And I need to get out of the way and let them do some creative things. In that environment, you're going to thrive. You've got to equip your people, which is really important. And you've also got to ensure the structures and support are in place. And we do that in Pivot in a variety of ways, but we start with talent. We figure out the team structures, the strengths of everyone. We talk about what the team can do together and how it can create even greater momentum for innovation and change. And we put the structures in place to allow people to do their best work, give them a big challenge, equip them, create transparency around what they're doing, ensure that there are metrics and measures, and then also celebrate along the way as they're making progress. And then in that environment, when you continue to do that, it gets into the DNA. And now you have people that can see not just an esoteric idea of wanting to change, but they see themselves in that equation. And so you have to assess where you are as an organization, And then you've got to figure out, here are the mechanics that will allow us to motivate people to move you along. That's what I see as the importance around corporate culture and enabling innovation and change.
Those are great comments, and I think really food for thought in the world where we are right now. Coming to the end of 2020 and talking about certainly D&I, and what I see is the need for diversity of thought around the table. Do you think that that plays a huge impact to trying to move this transformation journey to innovation in our business?
It's absolutely critical. Just think about it. I mean, in the traditional sense, people think about diversity with employees, and what you're trying to do is ensure that you just don't have everybody that thinks and acts the same way, because in the end, you're not going to be able to meet the expectations of customers. So if you stand back and say, what's important to my customers and my clients? What do they want, need, and will pay for? Well, when you have different kinds of lived experiences, different kinds of work experiences that you're able to bring to the table, your innovation is going to be so much better. The insights that you have will be better. The ability to challenge and come up with solutions will be more acute. And your ability to think about how you implement in a way that connects with the culture to meet the end need is going to be important. I'll give you just a very brief example. In one organization, we worked with a group that was looking at a market that had an increasing Latinx population, but really no penetration from their competitors. And we work with them to say, okay, whoever you put in as a leader needs to come from the community there locally. And by the way, you're going to get tremendous ideas from the community about what's important to them. And your innovation has to be community centric and tie into what's important to the customers in this particular geography, leveraging what the overall organization can do. And they've been tremendously successful. And so that's not diversity in the traditional sense, but that's diversity when you think about community and customer driven perspective that drives the products and services that you deliver.
Thank you for that. I love the not only community-based focus, but the client-based focus, how they go hand in hand into moving us all forward. It seems so simple. It seems so, again, something that we should all understand and appreciate. But knowing what the stats show, Phil, as you shared with AM Best ratings, we're not there yet. And so I'd like to ask you, what do you think the threat is of not innovating and not moving our ecosystem forward? And knowing what you know about Bermuda, how would this affect our marketplace as one of the top 3 domiciles of insurance in the world?
Sure. Great question, Susan. And Bermuda has so much going for it and is a real powerhouse in insurance. But looking at the history of innovation and the waves of transformation, it has disrupted some players. We mentioned briefly the music industry, but if you just think in photography, Kodak and Polaroid were powerhouses 20 years ago, fighting each other for global dominance. Both of them invented digital photography, but neither of them could execute on the tech. And in the end, they both went bankrupt. And so the challenge is, now that we've seen that happen, is industries and the communities, the ecosystems in which they're embedded need to be alive to that transformation, not least because the transformation is coming more quickly and the resulting disruption is even worse. So Polaroid went bankrupt here in the Boston, Cambridge area, and Boston was fine. It's got biotech and robots and all kinds of things. Kodak went bust in upstate New York and Rochester. That city has never really recovered. And so when I work with regions around the world in that REAP program that you kindly mentioned, one of the challenges for an ecosystem is to make sure that it's keeping its key sectors up to speed, because business as usual is no longer enough. And just driving operational excellence, that's exactly what Kodak and Polaroid did. They drove operational excellence until they went bankrupt because they didn't see the digital transformation. And as a result, they got disrupted. So my advice to Bermuda in this context, and it has so much going for it, and it's already thinking about this, the fact that you're holding this great tech summit means that you're sort of leaning into the challenge and the opportunity. But to think about it from an ecosystem perspective, there are multiple players. There are entrepreneurs and governments and corporates and BDA development agencies. They need to come together to work out how, as an ecosystem, do they thrive? Because it's not only about the individual companies or the individual's careers, but the whole ecosystem needs to come together to work out how can we remain world class. Because as places in the United States have found, once you start falling behind with a transformation, things can move very quickly in this digitalized and globalized world.
Thank you for that. And just, I guess, moving from that theme of the how, we've talked, I think, about the why and the importance of it. And I think we all agree on that. But the how is just as important as the why, right? It's where the rubber meets the road. And so, Stefan, if I may, with your background and expertise and the work that you've done with so many clients, can you tell us a bit more about design thinking? We don't really hear much about that in the insurance sector and how it influences innovation from your standpoint.
Sure, absolutely. And before I get into it, I'm honored to be here with everyone. I deeply respect sort of Cynthia and Phil and Charlie and all of the work that we do together. And it's been great being with everyone. So I'm going to start with why design thinking is important. So we're seeing a shift from focusing on competing on operational efficiency to competing on creativity. And disruption is one of the biggest risks that the C-suite fear these days, at least the ones that we talk to. And staying creatively competitive is really a form of resilience that the C-suite are looking to boost inside of their organizations, right? Design thinking is an approach to innovation that helps teams integrate the needs of people, the possibilities of technology, and the requirements of business success. So to said another way, design thinking is a way of working that helps teams focus on what's desirable from a human standpoint, what's feasible from a technological standpoint, and what's viable from a business standpoint. Right? Because the methodology is so very accessible, it also has the added bonus of allowing people who aren't trained as designers to use creative tools to address a vast array of challenges from operational to creative, right? Design thinking has 5 phases that I'll get to in a second, but it's empathy, problem definition, ideation, prototyping, and testing. And each of those is designed to go broad and then go narrow on and making sure that we have a robust understanding of what we're building and how to be creative. In the context of innovation, it's really helpful to think about it simply as a way of working, right? That helps teams and organizations understand the risks associated with making things that don't exist yet, like products and services, right? It falls really into 3 buckets. How we ask better questions. So how do we generate insights that allow for creative breakthroughs? The second is, how do we systematically cultivate collective empathy for our customers and for the people who support those experiences that we want our customers to have? We find a lot of organizations don't nearly spend enough time in the shoes of their customers, as well as in the shoes of the people who support the experiences that their customers have. So that's sort of deeply embedded in the design thinking process. And how do we incorporate feedback and validation into every single phase of the project? So one of the key aspects of design thinking that differentiates it from other approaches is the heavy focus on rapid prototyping and testing. Prototype development and incorporating feedback is the biggest pro of the approach, but getting the benefits from it requires a significant cultural shift for a lot of organizations. So making the shift from creating sort of perfect deliverables and over-indexing on optics of success and sharing ideas early, when they're sort of rough and ready is really the thing that we want to get organizations towards. And the irony of sort of perfectionism is that it's really expensive and risky. So organizations that have senior leaders that are willing to be able to engage the innovation process early are naturally much more nimble because they can make changes early before those changes become expensive. And I think that that's something that insurance can really learn a lot from.
That's really helpful. And so again, to make sure I'm on the right page and hopefully some of our audience today. So is design thinking meant to inform the process towards corporate strategy, innovation, or is it really a tactile practice, or is it both?
So it's actually both. So from a tactical standpoint, the methods and tools of design thinking allow individuals and teams to work through problems creatively very quickly. But the cumulative effect of embedding design thinking culturally means that you are getting much more feedback at every single level, allowing people to make better decisions quicker and allowing organizations to build things more nimbly, right? So it's at each level, you're seeing sort of the technical, can we do this? Customers, is this viable? And then all the way to the C-suite. Does this support our strategic vision? Does this push us further into the future and allow us to be a little bit more resilient? So it's both.
That's very helpful. And so thank you for that. And again, you mentioned culture a few times, which I find interesting because it's a theme in what we're all, I think, speaking to. And going back to, I think, Cynthia's comments about people being at different sides of the spectrum on this journey, right? And that could be the C-suite, that could be the culture of the organization, as well as the employees. Cynthia, do you have any thoughts around how we look to upskill our organizations to prepare them for the future in insurance, which I've mentioned has been slow to change historically, or how we look to upskill our people and prioritize that work in developing new skills with products and services and matching that. We talk about matching risk to capital every day here in Bermuda, but really matching those things together to move us forward.
Absolutely. I think it's important that organizations first get a real good understanding of what it is they want to accomplish before they start moving people around and making investments. So fundamentally, you stop and ask, why are we doing this? What is it that we're doing and why? And if we're successful, what does that look like? And from there, you can begin to understand the investments that you need to make. And it's not just money that you're spending, but when you are asking people in a job to take time to work on something, that's an investment. There's opportunity cost associated with it. So let's assume that you now are thinking in an organization, I'm going to give you one scenario, that you actually have great and innovative capabilities within the organization, and maybe they are duplicative, they exist in different places. And you've got kind of a startup here, you've got people that have been renegades here, and you've got some stuff in its infancy. You want to bring that all together. And we've worked with organizations who say, help us think about how we can effectively bring it together and create a really robust innovation function. And in that instance, the investment you're making is figuring out the structure in which people should work, figuring out how you create the incubator and the testing, but to cascade it through the organization. Because if it's only idea focused, it's not going to give you the return that you want. And so as part of that, the investment you're making is identifying those individuals that can be in this hub, but also identifying those business unit leaders and others who have sponsorship and ownership for what's coming out of the hub. And they feed needs into and they take needs out. Now, there is investment required to make that happen. In some instances, you will upskill individuals, right, who are actually running that center of innovation. In other instances, you're talking with business leaders and educating them around the criticality of the innovation in order for them to be successful over time in running their P&L. And so being very tangible about what that is important. So that's one organization that says, I need to pull the tentacles together. Let's take another organization that doesn't really have those capabilities out there in a fractured way, but they are convinced they need to create something different. And in that organization, our work often is around who are the partners that you can tap, the external expertise that you can bring in, ensuring that you've got a central place for how this all happens. So if you're going to have a PMO, if you're going to have your finance folks involved, making sure that your process is tight, but it isn't one that drives what you're trying to do because it can kill it. But the thing is being open to understanding that the capability in-house needs to be built, and the partnership externally can be so robust that it can accelerate your efforts. And that's often a conversation that people haven't thought about. Where can I go to get outside perspective and expertise to help jumpstart what I'm doing? That's an investment too. And when you do that, you're going to upskill your talent because they're going to learn from those outside resources. And we've seen that be so instrumental. It happens often in learning, right? So people have a learning development plan and they go to seminars and they get additional exposure. But when it comes to innovation, sometimes they're thinking narrowly about what they have to own. And you don't have to own it all. You just need to create an ecosystem that gives you access. And that access brings expertise, which then allows you to upskill and grow your own talent, and then have greater momentum for coming up with solutions that meet the needs of your customers.
That's great. Thank you so much for that. I hear, your comments around bringing external forces together into an organization. Certainly today, we've talked about the multi-specialty of all of us and how, all of that is necessary to drive innovation. Charlie, similar to the conversation and with everyone today, innovation underwriters facilitates co-creation, right? Bringing together multiple parties. Can you tell us how this works and how you achieve real outcomes given the obstacles that we've all chatted about?
Yeah, we, as I was listening to everyone else on the panel who, like Stefan said, is great to work with on this panel, but just in general, Cynthia's talking about the culture of the corporate and then being cautious as you make those investments and getting outside that bubble. Our co-creation process is designed to give a safe place to both test and learn and actually solve problem without the kind of corporate pressures to you have to succeed and your performance review is going to be based on this working. It's really, our process is optimized for experiential learning. So we superimpose those best practices that Stefan talked about, like this is how it happens. This is how it works, both tactically, but also strategically. And then we bring those stakeholders that Phil's talking about into the process in a way where they invest their time and effort and have ways to benefit. So it truly is you think about corporate culture and does the corporate culture, even if they've been working with Pivot and they have a great culture designed for innovation, they still don't have the culture of a startup. And the startups don't, they can't operate like a corporate. So what we're trying to do is create this kind of safe space in between where groups can come together, solve real problems, and learn those best practices, learn how to innovate, but actually deliver real solutions that can be, ideally, want to spin out startups and new projects that can be, incorporated into either a corporate or as a standalone insurtech. And we have we're only about a year and a half old, but we have a number of groups well on their way. We have a group focused on cybersecurity. We have people came from the startup world, but it's not just matching like a startup to incorporate their product. They're contributing with people from the industry, people from academia to develop a new product based on that customer-centric focus, where we're working with Carter Edwards to manage the process and also manage the outcome. So it's trying to bring all these concepts together and it's not, even though like InsurTech comes into it, it's really about the things we've been talking about, which is the culture, the attitudes, bringing the diversity of thought into the process, overlaying a really good design process. So your design, test, and then build, not the other way around, which a lot of times when you have to get something out the door, you build it, launch it, which is your test, and then redesign it. And so we're just trying to give people a place to learn and do.
That's great. Thank you so much. When I think about your approach as it relates to what I would call our Bermuda marketplace, and certainly what the culture of Bermuda is, having worked in London, having worked in the US, the collaboration in Bermuda as a marketplace is really one of our strategic advantages. We may work with we may have, competing insurance companies down the street in 1 square mile, but at the end of the day, our marketplace is what we all look to serve, grow, and protect. And certainly innovation has been part of our DNA. But innovation now through Phil, your definition is taking on a new lens and certainly a new journey. I know we're getting tight on time, but I just throw this out to the panel. If anyone has any comments around Bermuda, knowing that we're moving from kind of our evolution of product innovation, moving now towards really the innovation that we're talking about with the collaboration approach beyond our borders. Do you have any thoughts around how this is shifting, or any examples around shifting the underwriting or our distribution channels or our claims processes, which is really our promise to pay for our clients?
I would say that the collaboration that we've seen in Bermuda it's an understatement to say it's an advantage. It is a huge advantage, just the attitudes that the people bring, and the culture of the insurance industry more broadly is not open, and some of the antitrust kind of attitudes and just the history of the industry. Companies are not like Silicon Valley where collaboration just happens. It is slow to happen. So I concur with what you said, and I'll also say, that like when you talk about distribution and underwriting, and the lines between you start talking about robo advisors, the technology giving the advice to the policyholder, that is extremely disruptive between the relationship between the carriers and the brokers, and how that plays out. But it's crucial to get the kind of perspectives of all parties in that discussion. So that's kind of just one example that quickly comes to mind. I'll toss it to Phil. Phil.
I agree with Charlie. I think Bermuda has so much going for it. We look at, we've worked with 50 ecosystems around the world, and we get 20 odd a year apply for our program. Bermuda has so many of the elements for a strong ecosystem, and clearly in insurance is a powerhouse. I think the game changer is that the digital transformation is disrupting business as usual. And so our advice for a well-functioning ecosystem like Bermuda is to sort of make sure that the different elements with the different cultures are as well connected as possible. I think it's great that BDA has pulled this particular event together. As I was saying earlier, I'm delighted to be a part of Charlie's team because a combination of Cynthia's perspectives on people and Stefan's on design thinking is what you need. MIT's definition doesn't mention technology because technology, while hard, is the easy bit. It's the so-called soft stuff, the people, the collaboration, the bringing together the different players. That's the hard stuff. And we can see that from our MIT perspective, but it's great to work with Cynthia and Stefan and Charlie who have ways to make that happen. So in conclusion, I think Bermuda has so many elements to succeed, and yet we've seen so many places, even Hartford, which used to be the world capital of insurance. When things get tricky, it can really affect your ecosystem. So innovation matters, not only for the members of your audience who are thinking about that as part of their careers, and not only for their companies, but also for their communities. It matters being on the right side of innovation, because if you start to fall behind, it can have a real negative impact on your ecosystem.
I couldn't agree more. And Cynthia and Stefan, I know you probably have examples to share. The good news is, for everyone out there listening and who have dialed in, if you have questions or want to chat further with any of the panelists about driving innovation across your organization or exploring tangible ways to accomplish the things we've talked about, you can join us in the Cedar Networking Lounge by clicking on the forum chat, where panelists will be available to continue this conversation and address any specific questions live that you may have. And for those who are interested in keeping up to date with Bermuda and developments in our marketplace, or have any follow-up questions, I encourage you to visit www.bda.bm and contact Business Development Manager for Risk and Insurance Solutions, Jasmine Da Silva. And last but not least, thank you all today for your time. I look forward to chatting with you further on the chat group. And again, stay safe, everyone around the world. We are all in different places. So thank you for coming together virtually today on behalf of Bermuda. and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you, Susan.
Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Bermuda.